Thank you, Chair. Mr. Cousineau, just before the break, you actually lied to committee, and you did it for partisan purposes. You did it so that Justin Trudeau and his buddy Tom Clark would look good.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. We just had this
Your
conversation.
department.
It is a point of order.
Sorry, it's not. Can you continue, Mrs.
Yes.
Block?
Your
The
department.
language being used, Mr. Chair, the language is not respectful of our witness.
You do not have the floor, Mr. Longfield. You've been an MP long enough to know that if you wish to interrupt, you call a point of order.
You've been an MP long enough to know what a point of order is.
Oh my
And you should
goodness.
perhaps follow committee rules. And if you can continue like that, I will not recognize you, Mr. Longfield. But I take your point, but that is not a valid point of order. Please allow Mrs. Block to continue. I'm sure she'll get to her point.
Rarely do I cut to the chase as I just have done. But your department sent this committee a letter which stated that 50 events were held at the Consul General's residence over the past 2 years, not 50 events in 1 year. So that's 2 events, that's 1 event every 2 weeks. As a result of the information that you've given us, I would like for you to table with this committee a list of those events, together with the purpose of the events, the number of attendees, and now, because of this contrary information that you've provided for us today, I would like the dates of all those events included.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to clarify what's in the opening remarks that was provided was indeed 2 years. I might have misunderstood during the fast pace talking that was going on what was mentioned, so it is truly 2 years. And I'd like to add that as public service, we're here to represent the great work that we're doing, and I take exception on when we're being accused of being liars. We're there to be there for value for money and to do good stewardship and to provide Canadians what's best for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cousineau. I accept your explanation that you were caught off guard like the rest of us were in the midst of the rant prior to the break. Mr. Irek also accused the Conservatives of wanting to downsize, when in fact this is the argument that yourself and the officials have made as one of the reasons for why this is such an acceptable place for the Consul General to be moving to. So which is it? What's the official government line? Is it because it's a smaller residence and you want to downsize that you're pursuing this residence, or is it something else?
Mr. Chair,
point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Kuzmierczuk.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, it's not a point of order.
He's not making a point of order.
Sorry.
To downgrade.
I'm sorry.
That's not a point of order.
The word is downgrade.
Colleagues, please, one person at a time. Allow Mr. Kuzmierczuk to do his point of order, then I will decide. Could you just start again, Mr. Kuzmierczuk?
Yes, respectfully, Mr. Chair, I used the word downgrade. That the Conservatives.
That is not a point of order. We will continue. Go ahead, Mrs. Block.
So can you just reiterate for us, is in fact one of the reasons that this is a more acceptable location that you have made is that it's a smaller residence than the one that the Consul General is currently residing in?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to go back to my opening remarks. We actually have made decision on multiple factors. One of them is the net present value that it was bringing. The second one was around like the meeting all the future needs, value for money for Canadians. And while we are downsizing, it was not the main factor.
All right, thank you very much. In the letter that we received from Ms. McCardle, she also cited that there were other issues raised about the suitability of the current residence. These issues included lack of proper division of family and representational spaces and restrictions on events that were imposed by the cooperative board. What are the rules for the new condo? Did you ensure that you would be allowed to bring in large groups strangers for events at this exclusive condo building?
Mr. Chair, I welcome the question. As you can imagine, with the co-op model that exists, there was a lot of restriction that we had to face, which was very challenges. We do know that in the new location that we're going to go, there's going to be more flexibility, making us more agile for those representation.
So did you confirm if there were any rules in regards to the types of events that you hope to hold in the new residence?
Mr. Chair, I would respond to the current situation with the co-op and the restriction that we have, which would not be applied like the way it is with the current co-op environment we're in the new condo. So we are expecting more flexibility for sure.
Are there any rules that you are aware of?
Mr. Chair, I would actually turn to my colleague who have been working very closely on the purchase of the condo about the specific rules because I don't have those details.
And who would that be?
Thank you. Oh, that would be me. Thank you. We have taken into account the ability to perform the duties or the requirements of the program before purchasing the unit. I haven't read myself the condominium convention that exists at the building there, but I know that the unit was selected because it is possible and convenient to organize the events according to the program need.
It might state in that convention.
I'm not aware of any restriction that may exist in the new condo with regard to, typically there will be restrictions in terms of security and access, but other than that, I'm not aware of any other restriction.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Atwin, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought it was Mr. Jahari first, but I can certainly go.
Go ahead, Mr. Jawari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make a brief comment before I continue on the line of questioning. Colleagues, Canadians, we are here with a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that we hold any type of expenditure that we need better clarification accountable. It is fair to ask tough questions. It is fair to ask clarifying questions. It is fair to challenge the premises of the decision that was made by officials. But I strongly recommend for us to ensure that we carry the true meaning of what it means to be an MP, a member of parliament who represent Canadians, and stop labeling our officials who are working hard. And these officials may be working with other parties, hopefully not for a long time, but these officials need the respect because they are working very hard to represent Canada and Canada's interest. Thank you. So on Canada's interest, I want to go to, I believe, Mr. Allen, Mr. Mark Allen. Before I talked about the frame, I frame our conversation, three themes, imperative, I think we got it. I think our closing of the last round was around policies that were followed, values that were value for money. A lot of documents are going to come. We're going to have the opportunity to look at those calculation, valuation, and decide whether it is. But I really want to talk about the third theme, which was the importance. We've talked about the number of times, and we've gone to an angle that says, hey, look, you know what? Probably we could have done serving it out of somewhere else. Now, can you give me a sense of how big this mission is from a point of dollar value for trade? We're debating whether it's 2 meetings or whether it's 1 meeting per every 2 weeks. But how important are these? I hear $200 billion. I hear representing 6 or 7 jurisdictions. Can you break it down for us how important the work that we're doing in this area is?
Yes, this is one of 12 consulates general in the United States. This has a territory of 5 states, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Delaware, and Pennsylvania. And the $200 billion is the two-way trade between Canada and the entire consular territory. It's a very influential part of the United States, the Eastern Seaboard. We mentioned it's the economic capital of the United States and a center for global financial markets. So the GDP of that entire area is $6 trillion. And as we say, the two-way trade between Canada and the territory is in the neighborhood of $200 billion.
So for Canadians, I mean, the number we're talking about $200 billion of a $6 trillion opportunity. Can you give me what's the Canada's I think GDP in perspective?
Well, I can tell you that the entire trade between Canada and the United States is in the neighborhood of $3 billion each and every day. And that we can't, reference has also been made to our G7 collaborators. And I would say that it's not just because we're the United States' friend and neighbor that they trade with us. We're actually economic competitors of many of those G7 countries, UK, France, Germany. And so we need constantly to maintain these relationships, and our presence and our network is very much about being constantly in the orbit of U.S. decision makers in order to maintain our share of that important global trade. Thanks.
So with 20 seconds to go, I ask a final question. Do you think an investment of $9 million with a net saving of 7.4 over 50 years is justified to be able to facilitate, and I don't use any other word, facilitate the trade and the $200 billion opportunity in a $6 trillion market?
Mr. Jory has left you enough time for a yes or no question. Not even that.
It's not about my personal opinion, but it's about value for money, and I hope to have demonstrated the importance of this market to Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your...
Mr. Allen. Mrs. Vignola, please, for 2.5.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We've heard it mentioned that it would seem to be a bit peculiar to rent an apartment for the Consul General, but I'd like to know more about rentals. In New York, Global Affairs owns property, but it also has rentals. It leases properties. So how does that work? Is that simply a stipend that is given to diplomats and they're told, handle it yourself? Or is it rather diplomats who send the cost of these rentals to Global Affairs? How does it work? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, my expertise is rather in the real estate area. I'm not sure about rentals. I'll ask Mr. Dubois to give us more information on this. This is a good question. Housing abroad is managed by a number of different models. There are different models to give housing to staff. You can either the government can own property and then allow staff to live in it. Or in some cases, for example, in the US, individuals are asked to enter into a private lease and then be reimbursed by the department on a monthly basis. We have 3 overall methods. We can own property, then we can house the diplomat there. We can rent it, or the diplomat can rent it directly. And which of these options is the most cost-effective for Canada? It really depends on individual factors. In the US and in some European locations, private rental prevails because the circumstances there are better. Then there are other places where there are security or other factors which lead to a strategy where we own the property because we invest in security updates and we want to ensure that we can take advantage of those investments. So there's no specific blanket answer. It really depends on the conditions in an individual country. In New York, in Manhattan, how many rental properties are we using? And what is the total cost of those rentals monthly? I will have to go get that information for you.
Thank you, Mrs. Vignola. Mr. Bachrach, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious about accessibility, and it was mentioned as one of the justifications for the purchase of the new property that the old property didn't meet the requirements of the Accessible Canada Act. My question is whether the new property meets those requirements, specifically what the shortcomings at the old property were, and if the new property doesn't meet the requirements of the Accessible Canada Act, what the estimate is to ensure that the new property is brought up to spec and meets the requirements of the Act.
This is an excellent question, and indeed the current residence doesn't meet the Accessibility Act. I will turn to my colleague Robin Dubois that can speak about the new residence and information about accessibility.
You have a question, and you have several questions. One is about the shortcoming of the existing official residence, and there were two categories of shortcomings that were identified in that residence. One of them was associated with the unit per se. If I want to be more accurate, is the accessible bathroom were not available in the unit, and I know that there were also base building conditions that prevented full accessibility. So there are those issues are not found in the same way in the new residence, and now we can say that this new residence that we acquired is accessible.
Does the new residence meet the requirements of the Accessible Canada Act, since the Act was referenced in terms of the shortcomings of the old residence?
That's my understanding.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.